You are the only animal on Earth that talks. Not the most vocal. Whales and songbirds produce more complex sounds. Not the most intelligent by many measures. Just the only one that ever learned to encode the world into language. 3 separate evolutionary tracks collided in one lineage and made that possible. This video follows each track, shows why every other species failed, and lands on the moment they locked together. Here's the thing about a human baby. Within a few months, they start making sounds with no fixed meaning, and that vocal range keeps expanding long after the first words arrive. A chimpanzee infant makes sounds too. A 2023 study showed that young chimps can use the same call in different contexts, not purely hardwired and with genuine flexibility. For decades, researchers assumed primate calls were almost entirely fixed from birth, so this finding genuinely surprised the field. But chimp vocal development mostly flatlines after the first year. The calls they're born with are, for the most part, the calls they'll keep. Human babbling goes the opposite direction. The range widens, the patterns grow more complex, and the infant actively sculpts what their voice can do. Both species start with nearly identical vocal hardware at birth. Both are intelligent. Both live in complex social groups where communication determines survival. The divergence can't be blamed on a smarter brain or a richer social life, because chimps are already doing both at a high level. It's something else, something that sits deeper than intelligence or social need. Here's what makes this strange. The first track is anatomy, and the physical equipment for speech was ready hundreds of thousands of years before anyone used it. The hyoid bone is the only bone in your body that doesn't connect to another bone, and it anchors the tongue muscles that let you speak. In 1989, archaeologists at Kebara Cave in Israel pulled a Neanderthal hyoid from the earth that looked almost exactly like yours. A 2013 biomechanical study analyzed the internal structure and found force patterns nearly identical to what modern speakers produce. The researchers weren't claiming Neanderthals spoke like us. They were saying the physical capacity was absolutely there. Then there's the OXP2 gene. Scientists first noticed it because of a British family with an inherited speech disorder. Mutations left them struggling with grammar and the fine motor movement speech requires. Researchers linked it tightly to language. Then they found that Neanderthals carried the same derived variant modern humans carry, which means this genetic piece predates the split between our lineages by hundreds of thousands of years. A 2018 study complicated the story. FOXP2 regulates many developmental processes, and its role is more layered than a single on-off switch. The genetics were in place, but they were never the whole explanation. Adult humans also have a descended larynx, which lengthens the vocal tract and expands the range of sounds we can produce. A 2022 study in Science flipped the old assumption. Humans didn't evolve a more complex larynx for speech. We evolved a simpler one. That reduction turned out to be the better adaptation for the rapid sound changes, actual speech demands. So the hardware was ready. The bone, the gene, the vocal tract, all in position long before the cognitive revolution. Neanderthals had every piece of it. They had the hardware. Something else was missing, and it wasn't anatomy. Here's the part nobody really talks about. Even with the vocal hardware and brain wiring, you still need a reason to speak. Robin Dunbar, an anthropologist who spent years studying primate social groups, proposed that language evolved as a replacement for physical grooming, and backed it with numbers most people don't expect. In primate troops, grooming is how you maintain alliances. One animal picks parasites off another, and that contact builds trust. But grooming is one-on-one, time-intensive, and it imposes a hard ceiling on how many relationships you can maintain. Dunbar found that primate group size tracks neocortex size, and when you run the numbers on humans, the natural social limit comes out to about 150 people. That's Dunbar's number. It shows up in military units, corporate teams, and personal friend networks. The limit is real and rooted in biology, not culture. As human groups grew larger, physical grooming hit a wall. You can't pick parasites off 200 allies in a single day. Dunbar's argument is that vocal grooming, language used for social maintenance, let our ancestors manage multiple relationships simultaneously while keeping their hands free for other things. Dunbar's gossip hypothesis flips the usual assumption. Most of us think language evolved to transmit practical information, where the predator went, where the water is. Dunbar argues the original purpose was alliance management, reputation checking, and social bonding. The practical information came later, as a side effect of a social tool already running. Not every researcher agrees. Some argue practical information transfer was primary, and hunter-gatherer survival data supports that. But both sides agree on one thing. Social motivation is a separate requirement. You need a reason to talk, not just the ability, and that reason has to be biological, present before any culture teaches it. The anatomy was in place. The social pressure was building. That left one piece, and it showed up carved into a cave wall. About 70,000 years ago, the archaeological record shifts in a way that's hard to miss. Cave art appears. Tool-making becomes elaborate. Burial rituals emerge, and long-distance trade begins, all at roughly the same time, across multiple regions that had never shown this density of symbolic behavior before. Some researchers call this the cognitive revolution. They link it directly to the emergence of fully modern language. Symbolic thought leaves traces in the material world. Before this point, those traces are sparse. After this point, they are everywhere. In 2018, linguists proposed that early cave paintings may have served as a bridge between symbol and sound, that the cognitive capacity for representing something visually is deeply linked to representing something verbally. Supporting this, some caves with the densest rock art have distinctive acoustic properties. Sound echoes in specific ways inside those chambers, which suggests early humans may have been listening to those walls as much as looking at them. That fusion points to a brain doing something no other brain had done before. Noam Chomsky and a line of linguists after him have argued that the core feature of human language is recursion, the ability to embed one idea inside another indefinitely. A sentence like, "The man who chased the dog that stole the meat," contains three nested layers. Chomsky calls the operation merge and has proposed it represents a single cognitive leap, one rewiring that let the brain build infinite meaning from finite parts. What even Chomsky's critics agree on is this: human syntax is doing something computationally different from any animal communication system. No other species generates new sentences by combining old ones. Whether that capacity arrived in one leap or accumulated gradually, the gap between human grammar and animal calls is not a matter of degree. It's a different kind of thing entirely. And when that recursive engine switched on, the archaeological record lit up with symbols across continents, because a mind that can merge can also draw detailed plans and imagine futures it has never seen. Which means by 70,000 years ago, the body was ready, the social pressure was building, and the cognitive switch had flipped. So why didn't any other species reach the same point? Look at who came closest and what stopped them. Every species we've looked at got one or two pieces of the language puzzle. None got all three. Songbirds are the best non-human example of vocal learning. They acquire songs through imitation, develop regional dialects, and show neural pathways that parallel those human speech uses. But a bird's song doesn't name an object or describe an event. It signals identity, territory, or readiness, without the syntax that lets humans build new meanings from old parts. A recent science study found that songbird species with more complex vocal learning are better problem solvers with larger brains. The link stops at the threshold of syntax. Gelada baboons produce calls with extensive spectral and temporal modulation, complexity that surprised researchers when the data came in. But their system doesn't let them combine calls into new meanings, and they can't embed one call inside another to create a nested message. What's strange is that geladas live in a less complex ecological environment than other baboons, yet produce more modulated calls. That mismatch suggests social pressure, not survival pressure, drove their vocal evolution. They got the social drive. They never got the syntax. Neanderthals had the FOXP2 variant, the Kebara hyoid, and the descended larynx. Their physical package for speech was basically complete. Yet archaeologists find no cave art, no symbolic burial, no long-distance trade, no cognitive explosion. The vocal anatomy was there. The symbolic mind was not. They had our speech bone, our language gene, our vocal tract, and left no trace of the mind that turns sound into meaning. That absence speaks louder than any bone ever could. Chimpanzees share about 99% of our DNA. The 2023 study showed they have more vocal flexibility than we assumed. But there's no recursion, no shared intentionality at human levels, no system that generates new combinations the way a human child does spontaneously before age 2. The pattern laid side by side. Songbirds have vocal learning but no shared intentionality or recursion. Geladas have social complexity and varied calls but no syntax. Neanderthals had the body and perhaps the social world but not the recursive mind. Chimps have the social life and the genes but not the syntax or the full vocal hardware. Every species got one or two. Humans alone got all three. But saying all three is the map, not the territory. The real question is what actually happened the moment those three tracks finally met. The convergence happened fast. Once all three pieces were in place, something that had never existed anywhere in the history of life was suddenly running. The first track was anatomy. The descended larynx, the FOXP2 variant, the simplified vocal tract, physical capacity to produce a wide range of sounds quickly and precisely, in place long before language, shared even with Neanderthals. Second was recursive syntax, the ability to embed ideas inside ideas and build infinite meaning from finite parts. Without it, you have sounds and social bonds. But you don't get grammar. You can't say something that's never been said before. The third was shared intentionality. And this is where Michael Tomasello's research delivers the most precise answer science has to why only us. Tomasello ran a simple test with chimpanzees and human infants. An adult points at something in the distance. The infant turns to look. Not because anything dangerous is there, not because the infant understands the adult wanted to share something. A chimpanzee doesn't do this. It follows a gaze only when survival is on the line. That difference is everything. Chimps signal to manipulate, to warn, threaten, or request. Humans communicate to share, to inform, to point at a bird just because it's interesting, assuming the other person wants to know. No other primate does this spontaneously. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The engine of language is not sound, not syntax, not even intelligence. It's the assumption that other minds want to know what you know, and the drive to tell them whether or not it benefits you immediately. That is the piece that makes the other two matter. Having two of the three gets you close. Neanderthals had anatomy and social life, but no recursive mind. Songbirds have anatomy and vocal learning, but no shared intentionality. Geladas have social drive and complex calls, but no syntax. Chimps have social drive and flexibility, but not the full vocal hardware or the recursive mind. None crossed the line, because the line requires all three at once. Once all three locked together, each system reinforced the others. Grammar created new things to share. Social pressure created more reasons to speak. The vocal tract adapted to handle increasingly complex sound. That feedback loop is what the archaeological record captures as the cognitive revolution, and it explains why language has never appeared anywhere else. The odds of three independent evolutionary tracks converging in one species are vanishingly small. It happened once, in one lineage, roughly 70,000 years ago. Everything that followed, art, agriculture, science, every word you have ever spoken, is the downstream consequence. Language isn't something evolution handed us. It's something three separate tracks built by locking together, and only our species had the full set. If this made you think differently about why we talk, subscribe, because the next story goes even deeper into the moments that made us human.